Dalnegorsk, a small mining town in the far east of Russia, was put on the imaginary map of ufology in early 1986, when on a cold winter day, the locals witnessed a UFO crash. However, the incident gained more publicity and international fame almost a decade later, in 1995, when an American TV series on UFO research sightings decided to reveal the secrets of the crash. The Height 611 UFO incident has produced evidence that is hard to deny, even for the most ardent skeptics. Indeed, there is a wealth of physical evidence of the incident, and hundreds of eyewitnesses have made it perhaps one of the most documented and authenticated UFO incidents in the Soviet Union. Soviet Union, Dalnegorsk, Primorsk region, the 29th of January, 1986. Over Dalnyegorsk at 7:55 p.m., at least 20 witnesses observed a strange red orb flying southeast over the town. It moved soundlessly and parallel to the ground, about 3 meters in diameter, almost perfectly round, without any protrusions or hollowing, and similar in color to burning stainless steel. According to a witness, V. Kandakov, the speed of the object was between 55 and 60 km per hour. The object rose and fell slowly, its light glowing each time it rose. As it approached the hill called Height 611, the object jerked and began to fall downwards. Witnesses heard a faint, muffled thud as the object fell onto the rocks. The mysterious object then burned intensely on the hill for an hour, and according to other sources, for 4 hours. Dr. Valery Dvuzhilny, head of the Commission on Far Eastern Irregularities, was the first to investigate the accident and arrived on the scene 2 days after the crash. The area was then covered with thick snow, but there was no snow at all at the crash site, which was located on a cliff ledge. All around the site were the remains of silicified rocks, fragmented into splinters, which were smoky and covered with soot. A tree stump was found on the edge of the site, which was burnt and smelled of chemicals. Many pieces contained particles of silvery metal, some in the form of spray-like particles, some in the form of solidified droplets. The objects collected at the site were later named small nets, small balls, lead balls, and pieces of glass, as they were similar mostly to these objects. Closer examinations revealed very unusual properties. The chemical composition of the fragments, known as droplets, was a mixture of iron, aluminium, manganese, nickel, chromium, tungsten, and cobalt in large quantities. When some of these droplet forms were melted in a vacuum, some spread out, others formed into balls. Half of the droplets were covered with convex, glass-like structures, but neither physicists nor metallurgists could tell what they were. Examination of the tiny mesh-like fragments also tended to raise further questions. One of the tiny meshes was torn and contained very thin fibers of 17 micrometers. Each of the fibers was made up of even thinner fibers, tied into braids. Very thin gold wires were also found in these braids. The researchers said it was impossible to understand their structure and the nature of their formation. According to A. Kulikov, an expert at the Institute of Chemistry of the Far Eastern Department of the Academy of Sciences of the USSR, the webs resembled vitreous coal, but such a material could never be produced in an ordinary fire. The most mysterious aspect of the collected objects, however, was the disappearance of gold, silver, and nickel when melted in a vacuum, and the appearance of molybdenum from virtually nothing. The only thing that could be more or less easily explained was the ash found at the site. It looked as if some biological material had been burnt away in the impact. They thought of a flock of birds, a stray dog, or an animal that had been living in the zone, or someone who had fallen out of the object. Dozens of the samples found at the Krivaya River, 10 to 15 kilometers south of the city, were found to have been burnt at temperatures in excess of 2,000 degrees Celsius. A number of photographs were taken at the site of the crash to document what had happened, but to the great disappointment of the researchers, the photo negative turned out to be completely blank when it was developed. This may have been explained by the presence of burnt rock fragments at the site, which were found to contain rare earth lanthanum and silicon slate, both of which emitted magnetic radiation. But the weirdness didn't stop there. 9 days after the object crashed, on the 8th of February 1986 at 8:30 in the evening, residents spotted 2 more yellowish orbs, this time flying from the north to the south. On reaching the crash site, they made 4 circles overhead, then turned back and flew north. Dalnegorsk seems to have received special attention from the aliens at the time, because more than a year and a half later, at 23:24 on the 28th of November 1987, 32 flying objects appeared out of nowhere over the area. This sighting was remarkable, especially because there were hundreds of witnesses, including soldiers and civilians. According to reports, the objects flew over a total of 12 settlements, 13 of which flew towards Dalnegorsk and the site of the earlier crash. 3 hovered over the settlement, and 5 objects illuminated a nearby hill. The objects moved silently at altitudes of between 150 and 800 meters, and when they flew over houses, they caused interference to television sets. Interior Ministry officials present later testified that the objects were observed from a street at 23:30. They saw a fiery object flying from the direction of the Goredli volcano. In front of the fiery object was a lightless orb, and in the middle of the orb was a red orb. Another group of witnesses included workers at a local quarry called Bor. They observed a huge cylindrical object flying straight towards the quarry at 11 p.m. It was as wide as a 5-story building and about 200 or even 300 meters long. The front of the object glowed as if it were burning metal, and the alarmed workers feared that the object might fall on them. And at 10:30 p.m., the director of the quarry, Mr. Levikov, spotted another object moving slowly at an altitude of about 300 meters. The huge cigar-shaped craft had no wings and was completely silent. Another witness, a kindergarten teacher named Markina, saw something different. She noticed a blinding light at about the height of a 9-story building. It was a brightly lit orb that moved noiselessly. Somewhere in front of the orb, a dark, metallic-looking, elongated object about 10 to 12 meters long hovered over a school. This object emitted a half-meter wide, purplish-blue beam of light onto the ground, illuminating the area below. The woman noticed that the objects illuminated by the beam did not cast shadows. The object then slowly hovered over the hill, and the beam, which was now reddish, illuminated the rocks as if the vehicle's pilots were looking for something. The object then flew over the hill and disappeared from her view. The accident site itself was a kind of anomalous zone for 3 years after the object crashed. According to locals, insects and animals avoided the site, and mechanical and electronic equipments were affected. All the flashlights of a later team of researchers went out at the same time when they arrived in the zone, and it was only after they returned home that they discovered that the wires in the flashlights had burnt out. Dr. Dvuzhilny concluded that it was a malfunctioning alien space probe that crashed into the hill on that particular day, and despite the obvious damage it sustained, it eventually managed to lift off and depart in a northeasterly direction. In an interview published on the 29th of December 2004, the researcher said that he himself had once seen a UFO land. "I have only been frightened by a UFO once. It was during an expedition in Kamchatka in 1980, when we saw a strange disk landing near a 90-meter deep lake," said Valery Dvuzhilny. The researcher was a biologist by profession, but he made the study of UFOs his main goal in life. He set up a laboratory in his 4-room apartment, and by 2010 had amassed a collection of around 1,000 samples of material found at sites where UFOs were thought to have landed. He was the first Russian scientist to suggest that space visitors use geological cracks and fractures in the planet's crust as landmarks on the planet. The zone is indeed one of the most anomalous zones in the Primorsk region. 14 of the caves in the area lie on geological fractures that have strong electromagnetic and gravitational fields. Terny, Olga, and the town of Arsenev, a little further away, are also favorite sites of interest for UFO researchers, with more than 10 unexplained UFO sightings in the last 20 years. So what do you think about what you heard? Do you think that such a widely documented case could be real evidence of an extraterrestrial presence on our planet? Do you have doubts? Be sure to write down what you think in the comments and check out my previous videos, as you'll find more content on similar topics on my channel. Subscribe if you like what you see so you won't miss out on my upcoming videos. Thanks for your attention. See you next time.